Hey everyone, how's it going? I hope everyone's doing well. Thanks for joining me once again and welcome back to the channel. So what I'm doing today is continuing with another edition of black metal vinyl. So you'll know I've released several volumes of that, so that's just a video in which I show several albums from my black metal vinyl collection. So going in alphabetical order, the last band I covered was Goat Moon, so today we're continuing down with G. And the band I'm going to be talking about today is none other than GRAVELAND from Poland. So that's a band that probably needs no introduction to most people, especially fans of black metal. But just in case you're not familiar, GRAVELAND are a band from Poland, been around since the mid-90s, and it's primarily the work of one person, one man. That's Robert Feudali, otherwise known as Rob Darkin. So he's sort of the mastermind behind the project, writes all of the music and performs most of it in the studio. However, as of a few years ago, he started performing live with session musicians. So it is an active live band now, but it's more of a studio creation. And I'm going to talk about their style as I go into the albums, but basically GRAVELAND is a black metal band which evolved over the years into more of an epic pagan and Viking metal band, but it depends on which album you're listening to. So yes, of the albums that I'm showing today, I'm only showing 3. That's the amount which I own on vinyl. I own a couple of his other ones on CD, but he's released loads of albums. So admittedly, I'm not up to speed. I haven't got all of those albums, but pretty much every album I own I really like, and you can't go wrong with GRAVELAND's music, in my opinion, if you're a black metal fan. It's he has a unique style and sound, which I will talk about when I go into the albums. Before I go any further, just to get this out of the way, yes, I know GRAVELAND are somewhat of a controversial band in the sense that they've been infamous for their sort of far right-winged political beliefs and maybe racist views expressed in the past. But that was something that was expressed a lot early on in their career when they were very young. Since then, they've distanced themselves from that, from politics, and they identify themselves, as a pagan black metal band. And as I've mentioned countless times before, I don't support those political views, like far-right political views, fascist views or anything like that. But for me, the reason I listen to a band is because of the music, and that should be the reason for listening to a band. So yes, that's all I'm going to say about that. Let's not talk about politics, but the music. All right, so I've got 3 of his albums on vinyl, and these will just appear in chronological order. So just to give you some background, the very first album was called Carpathian Wolves, and that was very much in the vein of like traditional raw black metal. And as I've said before, I think he changed his style for the better, because the first album, Carpathian Wolves, while it's good, it's sort of like nothing you haven't heard before. It's unique, but it's sort of standard black metal. But then he started developing his own sound with subsequent albums. So the first one I'm going to talk about today, this is the one that came after Carpathian Wolves. This is GRAVELAND with Thousand Swords, which is considered one of his legendary albums. So this was the one where he started going in a more sort of epic, atmospheric, pagan metal direction, you could say, but it's still deeply rooted in black metal. Yeah, and what I really like about this album and GRAVELAND in general is just the music sounds incredibly unique, in my opinion. There's no other band which really sounds like GRAVELAND, and it started with this album. So let's talk about the sound a bit. So basically this album kicks off with an untitled intro that's featuring some thunderous kind of tribal drumming, which is kind of like this triggered sound. It sounds really heavy and thunderous, and there's some eerie, bleak guitar ambience in the background. On that note, I think the guitar ambience that is featured on this album, it reminds me a lot of Burzum, like early Burzum. So if you're a fan of early Burzum, this album will probably appeal to you, but at the same time, it still sounds unique. Going more into the sound, basically on this album, the drumming is completely thunderous. It's very heavy in the mix, which is good. And there is a variety of tempos, ranging from blasting to mid-pace to slow. And in general, GRAVELAND's music is sort of characterized by slow to mid-pace often, so he's not relying on blast beats all the time, which is good. And I find that there's a lot of time changes in the songs as well, and they make the songs stand out and grab your attention when new riffs are introduced. So yeah, what I like about GRAVELAND is it's not that typical fast tremolo, picking, riffing black metal, that you've heard a million times before. This is more sort of slow and it's unique and it's really focusing on atmosphere. Talking about the riffs, the way the riffs sound on this album, they're unique, they're epic, bleak and melancholic sounding. And these kind of riffs, they tell a story and they build up to a climax. So the music is really so important to the album. The riffs often build up, in addition to being melancholic, they often build up into a triumphant or grand sounding atmosphere, like that feeling of victory or power, which I think is common in this music as well. And well, like from Graveland's music. In addition to that, you do hear some dim synths in the background, like those kind of sort of choral vocal mimicking synths, but they're dim, so they're not overpowering everything, which is good. And they obviously lift the atmosphere. And the other good thing is the synths use a lot of panning and droning, but what I do like about it is they're not going all the time, so it's not like Emperor's In the Night Side Eclipse, you know, where it's just constant keyboards. So he only sort of uses them to add color to a song, if you like. And often it's just the guitars playing by themselves with these long, drawn-out, piercing melodies, which make for a good atmosphere. So again, the guitars remind me a lot of early Burzum, you know, songs like Spell of Destruction, that kind of thing. Now, looking at the vocals, just a moment. So the vocals on this album are typical raspy black metal vocals, but at a mid-range, so they're not too shrill or high. You know, it's sort of like a gurgled, raspy vocal, like maybe a bit like Nocturno Culto from Dark Throne, you know, just to give you an example there. And but you get that occasional Raven's call where it's like, ah, you know, like the really high screechy scream for effect, which sounds really cool. So all of these elements of music create an epic atmosphere which conjures images to me of Slavonic or Eastern European landscapes and the forests and mountains of Carpathia. So Graveland being a Polish band, you know, if you've been to that part of the world, I've never been to Poland, but I've been to Czech Republic, Czechia. The scenery there is beautiful, so it's very conducive to this kind of black metal music. Often the rattly drums and the frantic riffs when they are fast remind me of being caught in a snowstorm or surrounded by bleak landscapes. So you see this cover art, it's just perfect. Imagine like being in a cold, bitter forest with some you know, a flurry of snow or something in the bleak Eastern European landscapes. That's what this album reminds me of. So it's fantastic stuff. Now I will say this album has 9 tracks, including the intro and outro. It's an overall listen album in the sense that it's got that same great atmosphere going the whole time. It's not really one where there's like short standout tracks, because most of his songs are quite long, but there are a lot of standout and attention grabbing moments, I must say. So let's just go into some of the songs. I'm not going to do it track by track, so don't worry, but probably some of my favorite songs. First of all would be Blood of Christians on My Sword. Fantastic title, by the way, but not just because of the title, but just that song really builds and builds with the riff, and then the breakdown, like it's kind of this mid-paced riff in the middle, like very melodic, and then these choral keyboards are going on in the background, and it's just very majestic and atmospheric. So that's a brilliant song, and I love the lyrics in that song too, Blood of Christians on My Sword. Then you've got the title track, Thousand Swords. That has a slow, heavy and epic intro featuring a lot of haunting keyboards and thunderous drumming, and the riffs are epic as always. Some of my other favorite tracks are Born for War. That has a lot of grand synths in the background, so it's got that kind of symphonic choral edge quite a lot. And I didn't mention this, it becomes more apparent on later albums, but a lot of Graveland's music, especially when he went in a more epic direction, reminds me of the soundtrack to Conan the Barbarian, you know, with that like bleak, sorrowful classical music and those haunting, sorrowful Gregorian chant kind of operatic vocals. So that becomes more apparent on later albums, definitely. But yeah, so Born for War is a great track. I also like the song Black Metal War because that's an uncharacteristically fast track, so it's very fast and furious, and it's got some more of that crow coring, you know, that high-pitched scream, which he does occasionally to fine effect, which is fantastic. And then my other favorite track on this would be track 8, which is called To Die and Fight. That has some magically epic keyboards and guitars in the beginning, and the synths have the most amazing atmosphere in this song. So like, this is where the music is starting to head in towards a Conan the Barbarian soundtrack atmosphere, but it's still retaining raw black metal atmosphere. And like on that topic, this album is not overly raw. The way I would describe the production is it's raw, frosty and cold. So it's really got this bite to it, especially the snare, the drumming sound, but everything is still very clear. So I think the production's perfect. Like for black metal, you do want it a bit frosty and cold, and he certainly achieved that. So this is a frostbitten album for sure. Yeah, but like I said, the whole album is a great listen, and with Graveland, I think that's the way his music is supposed to be listened to. You listen to a whole album at a time rather than certain songs, just for that overall atmosphere, and it conjures the atmosphere and the landscapes of Eastern Europe, so I just love it. So have a look at the cover art here. That's Darken there in corpse paint, and this sort of medieval battle regalia. Quite unique. I know you can't say quite unique, but it's unique for black metal, like this kind of image. And all the song titles on the back, you see here it's Darken. It says here Darken, vocals, guitars, bass, and Capricornus was the one-time drummer. Is that? Yeah, Capricornus, yeah, so he was the drummer on a couple of albums, but it was mostly Rob Darken who wrote and performed the music itself. All right, so just show you the inside here. So first of all, you've got an insert with the lyrics to some of the songs, not all, so that sometimes happens with black metal albums. Maybe the lyrics to the other songs were controversial, I don't know. And on the back here, you have the kind of this Graveland mission statement where he's introducing himself and the band and what it stands for. In this, he's just talking about what Graveland is very much about is opposing Christianity and aiming for the revival of paganism in Europe, you know, like Europe going back to its traditions. And to that extent, I do agree, like Christianity obviously destroyed a lot of cultures and religions in the past. So I agree with it to that point. With this statement though, it starts going a bit further than that, like it starts talking essentially in like maybe racist terms, or talking about preserving the purity of a race and like blood mixing, and like to me that's where I just lose interest. I'm not a racist, and you know, so it doesn't apply to me. But anyway, there you have it. And with this album, very appropriately, plain black vinyl. What else could it be with that black and white cover? Cool labels with all the track listings. Yeah. So yeah, just a fantastic debut. Like, even though this is not the debut, Carpathian Wolves was, I consider this to be the debut of the great Graveland sound, if you like, which continued to evolve after this. So I will say a lot of people I've heard say that this album is a yawn fest, and I just completely disagree with that. Like I said, it's an overall album listen, like for atmosphere. Maybe it is kind of background music, but the atmosphere is always present, and it is absolutely fantastic. So yeah, I don't know what people are complaining about, but this is a good Graveland album. Not my favorite, but definitely one of my favorites. So that's Graveland with Thousand Swords. All right. Now, coming up to the next album, there were a few more albums in between, but long story short, this is the album from the year 2000. This is hands down my favorite Graveland album. You probably know the one that I'm talking about. This is Graveland with Creed of Iron. So you've heard me probably mention this in some threads in the past, but I've never spoken about the album in detail. The album before this was entitled Immortal Pride, and that is an excellent album. Unfortunately, I don't own that in original format, but I intend to. That album, that's where it really started going strongly in this Conan the Barbarian soundtrack direction. But this album, in my opinion, is where that reached its absolute pinnacle and its best, for sure. So, I don't know where to begin with this album. It's brilliant. It is a majestic masterpiece. I love this album to death, and I will never get sick of it. The way I discovered it was when I was tape trading years ago. A friend of mine, he gave me a burned copy of this on CD, and at that stage in my life, I wasn't particularly happy with, you know, my job and my studies. You know, like life was a bit of a drag, but I always listened to this album in the car, and it got me through because it took me away to this kind of medieval fantasy world where, you know, you just transcend your current reality and you're taken on a mythical journey almost with this album. So I know that might sound a bit flowery, but that's the kind of effect that it did have on me. So just consulting my notes here. Yeah, so this was released in the year 2000. This was the start of the epic sound of Graveland. So going in that epic symphonic direction, in what sense does it sound like the Conan the Barbarian soundtrack? Firstly, it's those choral vocals, or at least maybe I'm not sure if they're actual vocals. I think they're keyboards, you know, mimicking choirs, but very similar to those melancholic Gregorian chant type vocals that you hear in Conan the Barbarian. But I think there are some sections on this album where they are real live vocals being, like clean vocals being performed, you know, with the harmonies and everything. But in addition to that, the keyboards are used a lot of the time, but again, not completely, not like Emperor, it's not drowning it all the time. This is slow to mid-pace most of the time. The drumming is absolutely thunderous, and it sort of resembles the drumming of a medieval battle or preparing for medieval battle. So it's not like fast tremolo riffing, with blast beats, things like that. Not at all. Like, this is just like thunderous mid-pace black metal, and it sounds like it's sort of a call to war. Like, I know war is a terrible thing, but it's part of reality and it's part of the human condition. But this album is really good go war music. Like, I imagine on one of the tracks on here, I'll go into it later, but yeah, it's just like symphonic, classical, majestic, and extremely empowering. When you listen to this music, it's almost a feeling of elation, just with the sheer atmosphere and power when you listen to this album. It's absolutely brilliant. This also includes the Raiders of Revenge EP, and unfortunately, this is the re-release by No Colors Records. It's a re-recording, so the original I really like. I don't see the need to re-record albums, but this album is still really good. This one just sounds a bit more grandiose with the vocals and the keyboards, and uses some weird keyboard effects. In addition to that, the keyboards, there's so many different sounds. There's like the standard black metal keyboards, like sort of the traditional ones. Then there's the ones which imitate the sort of operatic choral vocals. Then there's ones with weird kind of effects. Oh yeah, the other type, it sounds like heavy pipe organs, the ones you see in a church. So really grand, like I just can't describe how huge and big and epic this sounds. It sounds like it was recorded, maybe in an amphitheater or an opera house or a football stadium, but that's the bigness, just contributes to the epic sound of this album so much. So again, it doesn't really sound like anyone else, but just to give you some kind of indication, if you love the Conan the Barbarian soundtrack and you love black metal, which sounds somewhat different, definitely check this out. So so it's got the Raiders of Revenge EP. Unfortunately, when No Colors re-released it, they completely fucked up the track listing here. It doesn't correspond to what's on the record, but on my version, when you read the record labels, that actually gives you the correct track listing. So Creed of Iron is the album which starts it off. For some reason, they've tacked on some extra track at the beginning before Creed of Iron. I don't understand why they did that. Maybe a fuck up or something, but it's annoying. I think you should never mess around with the track ordering of an album, even if it's a re-release, as I've mentioned with Winterland before. But anyway, yeah, so Creed of Iron, 5 tracks. So after that first track, we just tacked on, there's that epic intro, Blood and Ash, which sounds a bit like a fanfare, just creating that atmosphere with the keyboards and the kind of trumpet sounds. Then it goes into the long epic track, Tyrants of Cruelty, which eases you in. That's like a really slow, heavy, mammoth sounding track, but huge atmosphere with a lot of deep, heavy keyboards, and it's absolutely brilliant. But you may have heard me say this, and I'll say it again, my absolute favorite song on this album is No Mercy in My Heart. It's my favorite Graveland song, one of my favorite black metal songs of all time. That song is so unbelievably empowering and atmospheric, it defies description. I think it's absolute genius. Like, it sounds melancholic, it sounds foreboding, but then like when it builds up into the chorus, it's just so triumphant and powerful sounding. It's actually amazing with these soaring keyboards, those melancholic vocals, the thunderous drumming, which, like I said, it sounds like the call to a medieval battle. And honestly, I know that in medieval times they didn't have electricity, but if they cranked this song on the sound system on the battlefield, it would be great go-to-war music. Like everyone picking up their swords at the armory, riding out to battle. No Mercy in My Heart is a perfect song for that, especially considering that's what it's about. Like he says at the beginning, no mercy in my heart, I was born for war, not for love. And then, yeah, the chorus, war now is my life, but my God, it's so empowering. It's a brilliant song. So I can't implore you enough. If you've never heard Graveland, I would definitely say go and listen to this album if you get a chance, if you've got a spare hour. But if there's one song you ever have to listen to by Graveland, it's No Mercy in My Heart. Like, that song gives me the chills and tingles every time I listen to it, so that's fantastic. Then there's the track, another favorite track of mine is White Beasts of Wotan. So at this point I'll pause and say, if I was Creepy Ghoul, I would hold up a piece of paper now with the Anthrax mascot, which says problem. Okay, yeah, so White Beasts of Wotan, yes, maybe a controversial title there. Like I said, I'm not a racist, but like I said, I'm concentrating on the music, but that's got some more melancholic choral vocals, which are just so atmospheric. It's absolutely brilliant. And that's where they actually feature some live vocal harmonies as well. And then it rounds off with the song Ancient Blood. In addition to that, I said, we've also got the EP entitled Raiders of Revenge, and shame on me. You know, for so long, because Creed of Iron was the reason I bought this, the album, I never paid much attention to the EP, but in the last couple of days in preparation for this video, I've been listening to all my Graveland albums. I have to say, Raiders of Revenge is absolutely fantastic. Why is that? Because it's just like Creed of Iron, but in the same vein. So it's like more of the same thing. So of course I'm gonna love it. Those loud, bombastic keyboards, thunderous battle drumming, classical atmosphere, and just that combination of melancholy, power and triumph. That's what you really hear in this music. It's so incredibly atmospheric. So yeah, that's a great one as well. And I think some of my favorite songs on Raiders of Revenge are Source of My Power, and my absolute favorite song being Blacksmiths of Destiny. When I was listening to that the other night, I was thinking, these keyboards are just so bombastic and grand and heavy sounding. That's the thing, Graveland's very heavy, even with the keyboards, the drumming, everything. So absolutely fantastic stuff. So I got this one from No Colors Records. Cool cover art here. Track listing on the back. And it comes in a nice gatefold. Yep, so pictures of battle and war. So that's what a lot of Graveland's music surrounds, the concept of war and, you know, fighting against Christianity for the revival of paganism. Picture of Dark in there, in Sword and Shield. And you've got all of the lyrics here. But once again, maybe it's just due to my bad eyesight, the lyrics are very small, so I haven't spent too much time reading them, although I have a magnifying glass now, which does help. But yes, I do know you can understand some of the lyrics, like in the song No Mercy in My Heart, but ultimately it's the music that counts. But, and he also actually, on that note, like all of these lyrics are in English, but he re-released the album with Polish lyrics as well, like called Prawo Stali. I think that's how you pronounce Creed of Iron. I'm not a Polish expert, but I just like trying to say new languages. But yeah, and that's the funny thing about the vocals. There's not really any vocal patterns to this music. It's this kind of like raspy gurgle, and he just sort of says the words over the top surrounding the music. But it works. And on this album, this is where he really came into his own with his vocal style. So it's like that mid-range, raspy, a bit like Nocturno Colto, like I said. And who else I could compare it to would be perhaps like the vocalist of the Norwegian band Ancient, and also Shagrath of Dimmu Borgir, that kind of like gurgled rasp. But because I'm mentioning Dimmu Borgir, don't think this is a commercial band. Anyway, I like some of Dimmu Borgir, but anyway, I'm getting off the point. But the vocals are absolutely fantastic. Just showing you the records themselves. So it comes on this clear red vinyl, and translucent, is that what they call it? But yeah, I don't mind that because it's consistent with the colors on the cover. So yeah, that's really cool. I won't show both, it's a double vinyl. But yeah, like I said, No Colors Records fucked up the track listing, but if you look at the titles on the actual labels, they're actually correct. So yeah, double translucent red vinyl. Yeah, so that's all I'll say. Hopefully that's given you enough of an insight into the album, but as always, I would just suggest going and listening to it to get the real experience. So if you listen to this album, especially the song No Mercy in My Heart, and just crank it up, you will feel empowered. You will feel something special when you listen to this music, trust me. So go and listen to it. I forgot to mention actually with Carpathian Wolves, sorry, not Carpathian Wolves, Thousand Swords, that would appeal to fans of Burzum and the Polish band Juvenes, which was actually heavily influenced by Conan the Barbarian as well. Now this album, I hope my description sufficed, but I'm not saying this album sounds exactly like the bands I'm going to mention, but if you like these bands, it will probably appeal to you. So I would definitely recommend this if you like bands such as Emperor, Bathory, Juvenes, Moonsorrow, and the Conan the Barbarian soundtrack. That's all I'll say. Absolutely magic. Graveland, Creed of Iron. All right, and coming to one more to show you today, guys. This is the album which followed Creed of Iron. This is Graveland with Memory and Destiny. So this is another re-release from No Colors Records, where it was re-recorded. So The original version, which I have here on CD, this is the CD version I bought in Japan some years ago. This was recorded in 2001. Yeah, so the keyboards on this album sound different. Once again, I really like the original version, but the re-recording is interesting. I'm glad to have both versions in my possession. But yeah, so this re-recording was done in 2012. Yep, that's what it says here. And again, it's Rob Darkin making all of the music. Oh, that's what I was going to mention, the same with Creed of Iron. It's amazing that this massive, epic, huge mammoth sound is coming from the creations of primarily one man. He's doing it all himself. So on this album, it says, I think Rob Darkin played all of the instruments except for Anna, this Polish woman. She plays violin, viola, and viella. Now, I'd never heard of a viella. What's a viella? Is it between a violin and a viola, or between a viola and a cello? But yes, this album, there's still a lot of keyboards, and it's in the same vein as Creed of Iron. So if you like Creed of Iron, or love it, in my case, you'll definitely like this too. The difference is, while this is still very keyboard heavy, there's more of an emphasis on the string instruments in this. But that's good because it makes for variety, and it still has that very classical, epic atmosphere, which I just love. Yeah, so how I would describe this album, this is similar, as I've said, to Creed of Iron, but it's a lot folkier with the string instruments. However, there are still a lot of choral keyboards, you know, giving it that Conan the Barbarian-esque atmosphere. There are also a lot of deep horns used on this album. There were in Creed of Iron as well, I forgot to mention that. So this makes you really picture, you know, sailing at sea. So this cover really suits it well. And as with Creed of Iron, the synth sound is massively deep and fat sounding, making everything sound so grand and heavy, which is backed up by those thunderous battle drums. So absolutely brilliant. And like I've said, no other band really performs black metal like this. Now, the production on this album, I'd say it's thick, clean, and polished, much like Creed of Iron. And yeah, I can't emphasize enough how heavy these Graveland albums are due to the drums and the slow fatness of the riffs. And there's also, in some songs, I think like the first song on this, there's some very interesting drumming with unconventional rhythms. So it's really quite different to a lot of black metal you've heard. Now, again, it's got a lot of epic tracks, 5 tracks on this album, as with Creed of Iron. Now, my favorite track is undoubtedly track 2, which is entitled Duel of Atlanteans. This has got a hugely epic intro with the choral vocals, deep synths, and heavy drums of war. So immediately fantastic. The choral vocals sound so haunting and melancholic in this track. And when the track kicks off with the guitar and drums, it's rocking and heavy, but at a slow pace. The main riff is so catchy and very easy to hum along to, and that's the case with a lot of these Graveland songs, especially with the keyboards in the background. And yeah, the synths in the background often imitate horn sounds, the melodies are melancholic and foreboding as always, and those haunting Conan the Barbarian choral vocals are forever present. Then it picks up to sort of mid-paced blast beat gallop, and it's just got excellent climatic keyboards. So Duel of Atlanteans is a mammoth, huge track, and I just absolutely love it. I also really like the title track, Memory and Destiny. That's equally grand and atmospheric, but with more of a swing time rhythm and a galloping pace, but it's still got the same melancholic choral vocals. And then the album is rounded off with Legion of Giants and Runes of Rise. Yes, but as I said, just with Creed of Iron and Thousand Swords, this is definitely an overall album listen, because the atmosphere on the whole thing is fantastic. But just my favorite songs to recap, Duel of Atlanteans and Memory and Destiny. So again, with this album, just like Creed of Iron, I would recommend this to fans of Emperor, Bathory, Yuvenay's Moon Sorrow, and the Conan the Barbarian soundtrack. Okay, so just showing you the cover here. And the inside comes on this really nice gold marbled swirl vinyl with pictures of Darkin on the front. Yeah, gold vinyl is cool, I like it. It's got that kind of rich coloring, and it obviously suits the cover art as well, so it's corresponding, which is great. And I believe there is a really cool insert in this one. Yeah, this one's difficult to get out. So what's cool about this? It comes in this, what do you say, it's A6 size. So there's a poster here, so it folds out like that. And then you've got the lyrics to all of the songs here, and they are quite readable. But like I said, these days I'm more interested in the music rather than the lyrics, but occasionally when I'm sitting down, you know, the ritual of listening to vinyl, I will go and read the lyrics with the assistance of a magnifying glass. But yeah, cool stuff. There we go. And that's it for this video, guys. I'm just going to mention here, so Graveland has released so many fantastic albums. I'm yet to own them all, but I intend to slowly collect more, if that makes sense. So like I said, on CD, I also own the original recording of Memory and Destiny, which is an absolute classic as well. I will talk about, no, did I talk about this in my CD collection? Oh, maybe I missed it in G because it's A5, but hopefully I've given you a good enough description from the vinyl. And I also own this one, Fire of Awakening, which I've talked about a couple of times. This is the album after Memory and Destiny, so still continuing in the same vein. Other albums that I would recommend by Graveland are The Celtic Winter, which was an EP. That's got a fantastic intro. Also Immortal Pride, very much because it's like the Conan the Barbarian soundtrack. I really want to get that in original format. Yep, so I've mentioned Fire of Awakening. Other albums which I've heard and I really like are Dawn of Iron Blades, Fire Chariot of Destruction, and Spears of Heaven. But as I said, I'm yet to hear a Graveland album I dislike. So there we have it, guys. Tell me, what do you think about this band? What are some of your favorite albums? Let's talk about the music. I'm not really interested in talking about the politics, but I think this band, if you can put the politics aside and just enjoy atmospheric black metal, you will absolutely love this band. I'm sure a lot of you know it or know the band already. But anyway, tell me what are some of your favorite albums. So I'm going to wrap it up there, guys, because I've been going on long enough. I will be back soon with a thread response, so another new one's come up, and I'm really keen to jump on that. So that's coming up in the near future, and there's also collection updates and a shitload more albums to talk about. So I'll be back soon. Thanks for your support, guys. Thanks for continuing to watch. If you're new, please consider subscribing if you enjoyed this video. And I hope you guys continue to enjoy my videos and support the channel. So in the meantime, take care, and I'll talk to you soon. Cheers.